You're listening to Built to Convert, the podcast where growth-minded marketers, founders, and creators come to level up. No hype, no guesswork, just bold insights that drive results. Let's go.
Hey everyone, I'm Tyler Lane, founder of Session Interactive and host of Built to Convert. On this show, we dive into conversations with growth-minded leaders to explore how strategy, analytics, and smart marketing decisions drive real revenue-focused growth. This episode is brought to you by Session Interactive. We help brands grow by turning complex data and disconnected channels into clear, actionable strategies. Whether it's SEO, paid search, analytics, or content, our team helps marketers make smarter decisions and drive better results. Learn more at sessioninteractive.com. All right, today I'm joined by Kent Lewis, a veteran in the digital marketing space with over 2 decades of experience. Kent founded a digital marketing agency called Anvil Media that's received numerous accolades, including recognitions from Inc. magazine and Portland Business Journal, among others. He also is the founder of pdxMindShare, a career community in Portland, and currently serves as the executive director at NextNW. Kent, welcome to the show. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we were catching up earlier. I just saw Kent speak at AgencyCon here in Denver. And then literally the following day, I enjoyed the presentation so much. I'm an EO member and I decided to attend the same one on an EO webinar, which was awesome. So Kent, I appreciate your time and we're really excited to dive in here. Let's kind of establish some framework, some foundation here. Talk to us about your journey into digital marketing and what led you to establish Anvil and now kind of where you're at now.
Yeah, so I actually started my career in public relations in '94, and I moved to Portland, Oregon from Seattle for an actual paying job after an unpaid internship, which was, really ridiculous. That I worked full-time for 3 months for one $500 check. It was like white privilege at its best. When I first started this job in March of '95 in Portland, I knew one person, my cousin, and that was it. And when I started this PR firm, they mentioned they were starting up a sister agency that was building websites. They didn't even know what to call it. They said, "We build online communities." I was like, I don't even know what that means. Like everything was so new that people didn't even know how to talk about the web at the time. And so I started helping them doing research, and just because I thought it was interesting, shiny new object. And then a year later, just a little over a year later, I had been doing pro bono PR in exchange for our corporate website for our agency, our PR agency. And so I got to know their head of sales. And he one day came in and he's like, "Hey, do you want to move downstairs and work with us?" And I was like, "Sure." So, I'd gotten out of the PR agency mainly because I didn't like the 4 senior partners. 2 of them didn't like me. One truly hated me. But the others actually were fine with me or whatever. But as soon as I moved downstairs, one of the partners I thought didn't like me, he said, "Hey, Ken, I got a question for you about the internet." I was like, "Chuck, I've been here for 1 hour on my new job, but I'll see what I can do." But that was the first hint, ding, that something was different because he didn't have the time of day for me upstairs. I moved downstairs to this internet thing. Suddenly he had respect for me. I figured, well, maybe I should earn it. And I'll never forget, I was just their marketing manager learning how to market the agency or expanding it beyond PR. And then the creative director of all people took me out to lunch. He's like, "Kent, meta tags." I'm like, "Meta what?" Because I wasn't a programmer. He's like, you need to figure out what those are. We need to do something with those for our websites. And back in '96, Google was 2 years from being a thing. And so I learned to optimize for 14 different search engines, none of which were Google, right? And because of my PR background, I was doing a lot of PR for these websites, coolest site of the day and stuff like that. So as soon as Google came around and PageRank was a thing, all my clients were like #1 with a bullet because I had already been doing link development inadvertently because it's just one of the few things I happen to know.
Yeah.
And it stayed that way. And so I basically went from '96 to '97. I worked for this agency. Then I was recruited by a larger agency to be their online PR guy. And I was like, sure. And I actually transitioned. I was like, the PR team doesn't want to have anything to do with online PR. I think that's a mistake. The interactive team is like a 140-person agency. The interactive team was like, "You're not a programmer. You're not a project manager. You're not a copywriter. You're of no use to us." They didn't really, SEO was they understood what it was. They've been building websites since the early 90s. They were early in, but they just didn't see that the SEO was still not really understood. The ad side were like, we've got the banner ad thing. We don't need your help. So I was kind of lost, and I asked my boss, can I build a team that does this stuff that nobody else will do, SEO, online PR? And said, sure. So I started building a team in early 98. I had him for about a little over a year. And then in January, I switched over. He left. And a couple of months later, I joined him in early 99 to launch an agency called WaveRock. And we built that as a PR, where I moved all my online PR over to the PR team. And they're like, yeah, we get it. Like, let's do that. And that left me with just, because this was 1999, there still weren't really anything other than banner ads back then. I still think, I don't know why they changed the term to display, but BA is, I guess it's more encompassing. So I was doing SEO and reputation management and a little bit of digital ads. And I built a team within our firm. And we did that for just under 2 years. We got to about 35 people. And
Nice.
and then my boss, my mentor, fired me because he wanted to get rid of the gal that built the PR team to like 25 people. She was an atrocious person. And I knew that from the start. I didn't choose to co-found it with her, but I played along. I was like, yeah, I want to do the startup with my boss. So once she and I started teaming up effectively, he felt threatened and fired us. And then that company lasted another 10 months before it imploded, because we got fired in October of 2000. And that's a couple months after the crash, the first market crash I was exposed to. And it killed the agency. And because she and I weren't there to save it, I think we could have saved it. And instead, he sold it for pennies on the dollar. Like 9 people went over to a different agency, and they had to hire me, a year later to run my own team again. And so long story short, I've been a part of 10 agencies, founded 2, co-founded 2, exited all of them, but I've been fired 3 times.
Yep.
And from those agencies, always, never for performance, always for personal reasons where I just didn't get along with management. So in the week after I was fired the first time in 2000, I started Anvil, my agency, and it lasted 22 years. I sold to another EO agency in 2022. And now, because of the non-compete associated with the buy-sell agreement, I built relationships with partners like yours, agencies like yours, where I just refer, people come to me for help. I refer it out. I only do a little bit of fractional CMO consulting now, because I don't want to, even if I didn't have a non-compete, it's not enforceable anymore anyway, but I don't want to do another agency. 22 years was enough. Yeah, mainly I just write and speak and do a little consulting, but my day job now is running Next Northwest, a creative services and marketing and advertising industry trade organization for Pacific Northwest. And it's been fun. It's been a lot of work for a little bit of pay, but it feels good to, it's the same organization that has a 119-year history based in Portland. And I like it. These are the people I love hanging out with. I love the discipline. And I've always been tangential to it with PR and search. You know that we're both stepchildren, and we also typically make more money than traditional agencies, besides, person to person at least. So, yeah.
Yeah, Ken, great story. So much resonated with me. A couple of things right away is I was fired 3 different times as well from different agencies as well. Hey, we can celebrate that. Isn't it funny? Just like those things. And I say for so long, I was like, I got let go. Right. But let's be honest, I got fired. Right. And I think that was me trying to making sure that it was the nomenclature was a little bit more acceptable. Right. But it was such great learnings from those different agencies that helped me shape to what I am today. And I'm so glad that happened.
Yeah.
Another thing that resonated with me is that the PR agencies and SEO. Shout out to an agency here in Denver called Ground Floor Media. They're actually called Center Table now. They just rebranded. They've been doing PR for so long. And I remember talking with them when they helped me get started as well. And just how, I'm like, you're doing SEO. You just probably don't even know it. Right. These relationships they're establishing, they're building backlinks for clients. They're not even really knowing that or not monitoring that necessarily, but they're doing amazing things. So that really benefited their SEO a lot of ways. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Really cool stuff. Your talk and going to the Anvil days a little bit around company culture. Like I want to dive into that a little bit more in terms of you've really emphasized the importance of it, as we all know. Some talks around what is culture. It's not your happy hour. It's not the kegerator in the office. Talk to me about a strong what it means to have a strong company culture in your eyes, and how you felt you established that at Anvil towards whether it was that initially, middle, or towards the end. And I'm sure you learned a lot of lessons. Maybe pick and choose a couple of lessons that you're interested in. Yeah.
So corporate culture is interesting. I define it as how your organization behaves when you're not present. When owners and senior leadership is not present, how do people behave and make decisions and treat each other? And interestingly, I've been agency all my life, right? 10 agencies. And I thought I got culture. I knew it, right? It's like culture, agencies sell people, and the people create the culture. So in the service industry, your culture is your key differentiator, And I remember one of the first learning events when I joined EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, in '07 was Jack Daly, who's a famous sales consultant. And his event was called like Corporate Culture by Design or Default. And in the first 10 minutes, he was like, it has to be designed or else it just defaults to your personality. And I was like, oh my God, it is totally the Kent Lewis show. And that's not what I wanted. And so from that day on, I started to design the culture with limited success. In the early days when I started my agency in 2000, I started hiring employees in '03. So by '08 or so, I felt we had peak culture. And what I mean was we were 8 or so people, we were less than 10 people, and we all cared about each other. We all loved our craft, and we did great work. And we were relatively early to the game. For me, I'm an old man in the world of search, but we had a good rep. We were punching way above our weight with some bigger brands, relatively small firm. And the team respected me. I respected the team. And so that was peak '08. Peak earnings and revenue were in like 2011-ish. And by 2012, I started to see the cracks. And by 2013, I had to blow the company up. The culture was toxic, 2012, 2013. I didn't like going to work. I didn't respect most of my team. I was frustrated with my clients. I wanted to blow it all up. I wanted to quit, but I couldn't. I was the boss. I was the owner. I had no partners in crime at that point. And so I had to create this credo, this idea of why I went back to work. And it was really redesigning the culture and around a theme. I didn't understand at the time, but it was what I understood at the time is the team was not accountable. And I had created a culture by default, not intentionally by design, of a lack of accountability. And that lack of accountability was because my number two, ultimately I'm accountable, but I didn't realize that she was managing my team based on fear. You tell Kent any of this, you get fired, And so that was not productive.
No.
And I was warned, and I didn't hear the signs or really catch on because she was very good at covering things up. And once my team finally came to me and said, here's what's going on, I fired her the next day. But the damage had been done. So the company was toxic. And so I had to magnetize it. And my team was repelled by this accountability mantra. I was like, I can't replace the clients you guys are losing because you don't give a shit. And I was so frustrated that I wasn't helping. So we reset, and I was like, we're not about titles. You have a title and you can increase your pay with your accountability, but it's not going to be changing a title every year. And one of my great account people left because she just didn't get why I would say the titles don't matter. She'd been taught by her parents that titles matter. It's how you measure yourself. Yep. Ironically, she went on to a lesser title at a different shop, further mystifying me. So that's how toxic it was. She'd rather take effectively a demotion and start over somewhere else than continue on her path. She was great talent. So I lost some great talent by magnetizing the brand. But what it did is it magnetized and attracted others that thought that accountability is a native requirement, that high performers that expected no less. And so it took me 5 or 6 years. So when people say culture isn't parties and perks, well, it's part of the culture for sure.
Yeah.
But again, it's based on how do you treat your employees and how does that trickle down and how does it reflect back up? And so by 2019, I had what I thought I was 80% of the way there. I enjoyed my team. I was reconnected to the work, the craft of digital marketing. I loved my clients. I cycled through. I had in 2014, a year after I blew up the agency and had massive turnover, 100% for 2 consecutive years, there was a price to pay. My clients also turned over. They didn't like the turnover. They would rather have C talent consistently than a turnover slowly upgrading to B and maybe eventually, if we're lucky, A talent. They just didn't like the change and having to relearn new relationships, and the client and my team had to relearn those clients. So anyway, so the culture ended up being by 2019 was a culture of caring. Back to what I said, what I didn't realize when I wrote the credo, it was all about the employees and the culture. It was not about the clients. I was obsessed with customer experience, client experience for the first decade of Anvil's existence. And I didn't lose it. What I did is I moved from client first, employee second to employees first, client second. And that made all the difference to where they felt appreciated. They could take care of the clients, the clients took care of the agency. And that client retention went up, client, NPS scores went up, and net promoter score, and employee, ratings and satisfaction went up. And I had a chance to sell the agency in 2019, backed away because I didn't think it was the right culture fit for my team. And then I used the next 3 years to really tune the agency, the people, and from that came a dramatic improvement in profitability, which improved my multiple. And then I exited in 2022 for 1.5x more than I would have sold for in 19, because I had a really strong, I think, culture by designing where I started directly having a relationship with every employee, and they saw that I cared. I showed that I cared. I didn't just throw money at problems. I threw my time and energy, and it was appreciated for sure.
Yeah, I love that. What a great story. Another just so many things. I think being able to blow up your agency, like one of the most intimidating things. I mean, your reputation's on the line, Ken, right? Yep. You're like, I'm going to lose all these clients. That's a big thing that I always say to my team is like, session is only as good as the next team member engaging with the client. And if that's not like distant, if that's not, showcasing your ideals and your values and the ethos of the company, then there's an issue, right?
Yeah.
And that reflects on the CEO, the owner, of course.
Yeah. I do want to add one thing, if I can, Tyler, is that the other thing that I really learned was from Dr. Dave Rendell, who I saw speak at an event and invited him to speak at EO Portland. And now he tours the world speaking at EO chapters. And he wrote this book called Freak Factor. And it's basically fly your freak flag. Whatever it is you do, you're a 10 at something. But with that 10, Peter Drucker's principle, there's an opposing valley. So what he says is focus on your peak and change the view so people don't see your valley, right? He said, I asked him when I first met him 15 years ago, could Steve Jobs be as brilliant as he was without being such a jerk? And he said, absolutely not. Like, his brilliance comes at an expense. And, and Zuckerberg and Musk and Gates, like, they're these, weirdos, but they're on the spectrum, every single one of them. Sure. But there's a reason that they're some more brilliant than others, some more ruthless than others, but that they're successful, right? So what I did was I took that idea, and then Jim Collins, Good to Great, and the Hedgehog, and getting the right people in the right seat on the bus, and I tweaked it to the right seat on the boat, like Boys in the Boat, one of my favorite books and movies, is everybody's pulling. It's not a passive metaphor sitting in a bus because then you're going to read a book or watch, YouTube. You have to be in there pulling your weight. And if you pull together at the same time, you get that, the swing, as they call it in crew, and then you are more efficient. So we went through exercises. What do we do with that extra 30% efficiency? Do we take more time off and have lifestyle, or do we double down and make more money for ourselves and each other? And I wanted my team to think about that. How do we create swing in the business? But mainly it was putting people in the right seat on the boat. So I moved people around and I stopped fretting over their idiosyncrasies and started celebrating them by mitigating any downside and maximizing the upside of whatever their strengths. And, there's strength finders, there's a strategic coach has, your superpower. It's all the similar concept. And that was a key part of our culture, was celebrating each other, understanding each other's strengths and celebrating them.
Yeah, no, I love that. We're actually about to execute Strength Finder. We did it a while ago. We're going to redo it. Get in maybe, hey, I hate talking tactics, right? Hey, let's establish a strategy. Then we'll get to the tactics, right? A classic client, like, do this for us, right? But hey, let's create a strategy. So talk to me about the strategy, I guess, that you had created at Anvil. Okay, recognized it, blew it up. And then let's say you put this strategy, you had this vision of how the culture, how you're going to put employees first, clients second. What were some of the tactics? Like, hey, you just hired me, Kent. What's the process of onboarding? How do you to show the love? Yeah, all that. I'd love to hear some of that.
Yeah, so it starts at the recruiting stage. We got better at interviewing, and by that I mean we stopped worrying about how interviews went, and we started we started with a phone interview because my VP at the time could sniff bullshit a mile away, and he would 80% of people wouldn't make past the phone interview.
Oh, wow.
Then let's say 80% wouldn't make it past the face-to-face interview of just getting to know them face-to-face and their idiosyncrasies, their presence, all that. But so the 10% that made it through all that went through a presentation. We gave them real data from usually a past client and had them put together a presentation, like, tell us what you understand based on this data. Kind of regardless, if they were a paid media person, we'd give them paid data. If they're an SEO person, we'd say, look at this site and here's a little bit of data on how the site's performing, from GA or whatever, Google Analytics. Yep. And then they would present that weeded out 95% of the remainder. So if we looked at 100 people, we'd end up with 2 candidates. You know what I mean? So top grading, also an EO concept of really understanding all the bumps and bruises of everybody's life, accounting for their whole career every minute. We took that less about the bumps and bruises, more about what do we end up with? What is this person capable of? And that was the first thing. And we vetted. Our questions were all around our core values and their alignment with those values, as well as their ability. So their technical ability, their knowledge, experience was actually secondary to their fit and their values aligning, right? So that was the first step. Then the next step that I found was missing when I became an employee in 22 was we called it IDP, which we've had forever. And then I started managing them more actively the last 5 years of my agency's existence. Was what are the short, mid, and long-term goals? Short term would be quarterly goals, midterm 1 to 3 years, long term 5+ years. Is where do they want to be? What do they want to do? And just having that conversation is huge. And then you reverse engineer from their long-term goals. What are the steps and accomplishments and certifications and training and development do they need? What tools do they need to succeed? So that was something I took for granted. I don't think we could have done a much better job of. I hadn't done stay interviews at Anvil. That was a miss. But that ties. So if you have a roadmap, you understand where you fit. You understand you're going the same direction together when you have a roadmap, an employee roadmap, or we call it IDP. So with your IDP, then you knew, like, once a month we would review it. Once a quarter, we started to implement quarterly reviews, ratcheting more frequently from annual reviews, which I don't think work. Other than 360 feedback once a year, I think is helpful from coworkers and clients and partners. But quarterly, you should be looking at how are you adjusting your path. I didn't have that when I was an employee, and I felt lost. I felt unappreciated because nobody had a conversation. What are your strengths and how do we deploy those long-term? What are your goals? It was like, you sold and you're our CMO now. Like, I think that's enough. And I've done very well in ambiguous situations. I've created my career since 1996, effectively. So it wasn't like I needed a lot of guidance. I just needed a little bit of acknowledgement and a little tiny, I didn't think I needed pats on the back, but I did because it was a new role for me. And at a new company, when we merged, it was new to me. So they didn't give me that love and that guidance, and I didn't have that alignment. And I think that's important. They were an EOS shop, or are, and
Sure.
I had issues with how that was implemented. It felt very inhumane to me. It's great for entrepreneurs that have shiny object syndrome and OCD and ADD, but it's not great at the human side. And there are EO implementers that take issue with, some of my experience. And I'm like, my experience was my experience.
Sure.
And too bad we didn't have you, right? But we didn't. So I'm just sharing my experience, right? So it can be a lot of my concerns have been refuted that there's a solve for that in EOS. My point is, the roadmap's key. And then I did for 19 years out of my 22-year history at Anvil, I had monthly one-on-ones where if we could, we'd do 15-minute walks, right? With every single employee. And the goal was simply just asking 3 questions, like, how's life outside of work? Get to know them and get updates. How are things going outside work? And is there anything I can do to help? And you'd be amazed how little that positive effect that had with all that time commitment at our peak size. It's, I had one point I had 2 agencies, 22 people. It was 2 days worth of meetings every month. And they would not be honest with me. I had people say everything's great and they quit the next day. I'm like, what is going on? So in the end, I realized I had not built the trust. There was a missing trust there, in part because of my middle management. There are blockages in communication flow that create enough distrust. And my personality, apparently, of being high standards, people were intimidated or afraid to come to me about stuff. And whenever they did, it went really, really well. And then when they leave and quit, and I asked why, what was going on, they'd say, well, you never this or that. I was like, did you ever ask me that or tell me that? No. Then how am I supposed to help you? Yeah. Right. So anyway, it was a very powerful lesson that this all works but trust needs to be built and maintained for any systems to work. And the last part is even doing exit interviews and postmortems. I found that even those during a toxic culture were performative and a waste of time, and people would just say mean stuff, or we weren't ready to hear what they wanted to tell us, or what I mean. So you really have to go in, just like with stay interviews. When you ask, you're flipping an annual review around into at least twice a year. I would recommend sitting down with your employee and say, what do you need to stay here and be happy? What tools, what support, what acknowledgement, what do you need? And nobody in my entire career has ever asked me that. And I can't imagine how transformative that would be. So then you don't have, that can turn into an exit interview, right? Pretty quickly. If they say there's nothing you can do to keep me happy here, well then cool. Let's just have a transition plan. And there's one of my fellow agency owners that's an EO, he calls it mindful transitions, right? And I think it can be, the first step is, can I put you in a different seat on the boat? And if I can't, then let's help you exit gracefully. Because I was more like, don't bump your ass on the door on your way out. Like, get out of my company, usually because they were toxic or not performing, and I don't have time for that. I believe in hiring slow and firing quick. Unfortunately, in our world, when you find good people, sometimes they hire too fast. And most EO members or most business owners fire way too slow, right? And that I've had many EO events where they're like, who has an underperformer? He's like, fire them Monday, and this was on a Friday at an EO Alchemy event. He's like, trust me, like, they're going to be grateful because they've been faking it and waiting every day to get fired. And I was like, oh my God. And it's totally true.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to manage people up if you can, but know in your heart by this point that person is never going to make it.
Yeah, totally. That concept, it reminds me of a book. I think I have it, like the No BS Guide to Building a Small Business, whatever. I forget who, Casey or something. I forget who, but it's the same thing that I try to adopt around, like, what are your personal goals? What are your professional goals? Let's try to get you there, right? Yep. And the second we can't get you there, if it's a title, if it's comp, whatever, let's help you get to the next agency or place that has that open spot for you, right? But so a lot of that resonates. And so talk to me about, those you moved to much more frequent interview schedule, or, with those internal team members, those stay interviews. Was it a lot of, I know we kind of talked about this briefly at AgencyCon, but was it a lot of team members stating, hey, just pay me more, or I want a newer title, a higher title, Or did you find that it wasn't like that? Talk to me about that, because a lot of people, obviously financial aspects are essential, but people have different goals. Talk to me about that a little bit.
Okay, so when it comes to having tough conversations with employees that are, maybe it's tough for them, maybe it's tough for you. I always found, so let's give you an example. I was talking yesterday, we've got a thing called EO Igniter here in Portland. We're piloting it where we have businesses between 0 and 250,000 in revenue.
Sure.
So they've just put their second foot in or are committing to running a business, and they have not had experience. And the goal is to graduate them to Accelerator and then into EO proper at $1 million or more revenue. And so we were having the conversation. One of the gals runs a restaurant, like a little storefront, and does catering and stuff. And she's like, I have this totally entitled kid that just wants everything and wants it now. And I was like, oh man, tell me about it. I've been there. And I said, the old me would have been like, made a little effort to try and be somewhat accommodating, or I should say politically correct and somewhat empathetic, this much, and say like, listen, I understand, but it's not going to happen. And I get it though. You're exasperated as an owner. You're like, I don't have time for this. So what I told her was what I used to do with these conversations when somebody had really unrealistic goals and expectations of their role, whether it was title or compensation, was to say, all right, let's do this. And so I would map out what it would take for me to say yes to that ask. They want to make another 20 grand. You got to generate another 20 grand worth of revenue. You know what I mean? How are you going to do it? We can brainstorm it together. I'm not here to challenge. I'm not here to break you, but we're I will help you and guide you, and I will agree to this. But you got to carry your own water here. I loved when people come to me and say, when are we doing this IDP, this career thing? And I'm like, well, if you want me to do this for you, then I will take some of your pay because I'm doing your job, right? It's your career. You should be leading this conversation, and we will guide and support that. But that was because my managers were not having those meetings, and that was on us, right? They weren't, putting. So my point is like, okay, you want to make it to VP? Here are all the things you have to check off. Go, right? And 99 times out of 100, we never talked about it again, and they never achieved any of those check boxes. And for the one time that it happened, I was happy to promote that person.
You were like, amazing.
Whatever it was, right? Because they wanted to do it and they were willing to do it. But most 90% or 95% of people, they want to give it a go. And what they think is, doesn't hurt to ask. Well, the one time I got fired, the first time I asked for more equity in a company that we had helped build to $3.5 million in less than 2 years. And we had, just to be specific, because it doesn't matter anymore, but we had been given day one 6% of the business when it was worth nothing. And a year and a half later, we were at $3.5 million with no signed, equity agreement, and we were concerned. A little over a year later, I should say. So we negotiated back and forth for a couple months, and then the gal that I said was toxic, she said, I'm going to go in and ask the boss for 9%. Three more points because we built this company for him. In retrospect, we totally built the company for him. He either got out of our way or he fostered the friction between us, thinking it would build it faster, which to some degree it did. Our competitiveness really, had some positive effects, but mainly it was toxic. And so she's like, by the way, as we're walking, I was like, fine, I'm with you. Like I helped build this as much as you did. And on the way in, she's like, by the way, you're going to ask him. And so I sat down and I was like, we think now that we're this size and without an agreement in place that we should, we hadn't finalized anything, that we deserve more. And we're talking, 9% each. The other two people had 2% each. So he still had 80, almost 80% of the company at that point. That he had put, all he had done was put his 401k down to fund it initially, and then we were off to the races. He did more than that, but not a whole lot more. And so his veins in his neck popped out, and he said, F no. And I was like, okay, to me, it didn't hurt to ask. Well, that was what got me, right? That's what got him to tip over and like, you're getting fired too. So when people ask for more than they deserve and overreach, it can have damaging effects on their reputation, right? So that's my point is I thought there was no harm in asking, but there was a time and a way to do it, and we had the wrong time. And because I hadn't prepared, I didn't do it maybe in the right way, but mainly he was not interested. I don't believe that was a fireable offense, asking for more equity after we had proven a year and a half of growth. But it pissed him off. So, so I guess I would say those tough conversations. I'm a big fan of improv. Yes, and is a much better way to go than hell no, no in his case.
Yep. Love that. Yeah, well, bring the argument. I mean, it sounded like you did. You had the revenue and things like that. But that's, I mean, kind of the advice. Like, here's what I've been able to accomplish, and then be realistic too. I think, there's so many open source salary tools and there are things like that. Yeah. You were asking for equity, obviously a little bit different, but man, the writing was on the wall in terms of when he said no, right? Yeah.
Also you should know, I wrote an article on how to ask for a raise because I felt I was always offended when people said, this is what my friend makes. I was like, go work for your friend or go work with your friend. Now, granted, it seems logical to say, look at salary surveys and talk to your friends and see what are they making, and then go in and make a case based on that. But I was like, that is the wrong argument, because I pay what I pay, and I don't until if I'm in danger of losing somebody, we might talk about it. But in 22 years and 150 employees, I probably burned through, averaging only less than around a dozen. Over all those years, I never officially countered once. There was one guy that was so good, but he's like, listen, I got to take this corporate job. It's like way more pay and it's a unique opportunity. I was like, so there's nothing that would keep you here, right? He's like, no. I was like, that was the closest I ever got to a counter. Was just asking. I never countered. When people left for money, I was like, then you leave for money, because I'm not keeping you with more money. That is not, it needs to be about fit. It needs to be about alignment of values, and more money. I always paid above. So for instance, this is a good tip. I don't have an MBA, but my MBA, that was my ops manager, didn't think of this, she's like, our team is paid below average pay. I said, is that based on years of experience? She's like, I don't know. I said, why don't you scatter plot that? She's like, scatter what? I said, so basically, here's my team, pay over time. And they were all 2 to 5 years experience. And the people that she was comparing to were 10 to 20 years experience. Yeah, so I said, at 3%, I'm paying twice what they're being paid based on their experience. I said, experience. I've written articles where experience is not as important as fit, because you can teach, especially with AI, knowledge and experience are secondary to every other criteria now. So same thing with salary. That's not what's most important to me. It's, what is your contribution? What is your value to this organization? That's what I'll pay you for. So I tell MBAs regularly, I can't pay you what you think you're worth or what you need, or maybe even what you deserve, because you have an expensive degree. And I'm not going to pay extra for that. I'm sorry. And so people would still work happily. I've never hired an MBA that was worth a shit. But maybe that's because they didn't go to Harvard and Princeton and Yale. But be that as may, I thought it was a total waste of money, and that's why I don't have an MBA. You and I went to school, hard knocks. I don't know, maybe you have one. But
I don't. No, trust me. I barely got my degree, so
yeah. So I think it's highly overrated, and I think school is somewhat broken. It's an important experiment, but it's broken. So that's my thought there.
Yeah, that's great stuff. Yeah, and it's I could care less, right, of where you went to school. It's like, what have you been up to? What's your contribution at those other companies, and what are you planning to contribute to us? So yeah, great stuff. Switching gears here really quick before we wrap up. You sold Anvil 2022, right? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yep. Are you with the AI revolution, whatever you want to call it? Are you glad you sold at that time? Are you? Yeah. Yeah, what are your thoughts?
That came up yesterday. I was talking with one of my advisory committee members that has a staffing firm. We were talking about the state of agencies, particularly large agencies. I was like, I think they're dead and dying. And I would say I probably did get out at about the right time. I think agency valuations are not going up. They've been compressing. I think my agency in 2000, at peak at 2010 or 12 was worth more than twice what I sold it for at the time. In 22, so 10 years earlier, it was worth way more. Valuations were 6 to 10 X multiple EBITDA, and now they're at 3 to 5, and not even more like 2 to 4. So yeah, I mean, I got out at a decent EBITDA when I had it was the highest profit ratio I'd had in like 5 to 8 years. But my revenue was very flat over where it was previous.
Sure.
In fact, it was down from my peak meaningfully. So I got the most of what I could expect. We'll see. I still have another 4+ years on my payout, which we stretched and renegotiated because it was the agency was struggling magically after they fired me. They struggled. Could it be a coincidence?
Yeah.
Every agency after they let me go or I quit or left, nobody ever did better than they did when I was there. And that's just an observation. May not, it's probably not causation, maybe not even correlation, but either way. So I would say that AI has transformed menial tasks, but where it's going, and not everybody agrees with me on this, is taking our jobs. The white collar senior executives will not be as valuable in 5 years from now. Once we effectively twin ourselves or others twin us, I used to say there's no replacing experience when it comes to being a strategist or thinking strategically. But unfortunately, AI can pull all the data from all past strategic thinking. It can beat humans at chess, right? Yeah, it can pass the bar. So I'm less worried about junior talent than others. I'm more worried about senior talent. Because they're more expensive. And once we suck the life out of them with AI database knowledge and train prompts to replicate certain types of thinking, that's the scary thing to me. I always say, like, a graphic designer becomes a art director, a copywriter becomes a copy editor. So it can move junior people up faster, but it can also push people in the senior level out. So they need to think about how they're leaning into AI and AIO and that sort of thing. And I know we're out of time here, but I do think that the smart agencies will be leaner, smaller, faster, and niche down into specific industry verticals or skill sets that are hard for AI to beat, but AI can improve and enhance, margins.
Yeah, no, great insights. And, you've seen it all coming up. And sometimes when you're talking about, like, God, I wish it was 1996 again, so we could, stuff some keywords and rank number one, be right. Good. Ken, it's been a true pleasure. I really appreciate your time, and talk to us about where people can find you, where people can get connected, and both online and on social media.
Yeah. So best place to connect with me is on LinkedIn. I'm literally at /Kent Lewis. And then KentJLewis.com is my speaking website. NextNorthwest.org is my day job. And you can find me at those places.
Excellent. Ken, we'll have to have you out to Colorado and maybe go out to Vail or or something like that, make some turns.
That sounds good.
That would be awesome. Great to have you. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to Built to Convert. If you're serious about growth, don't just listen. Subscribe, leave a review, and follow us for new episodes that drop straight into your feed. Until next time, keep building.